There's the button.
To use all the time. Okay, so we just ended the job fit mock interview. We're waiting on Jen to come for the tech interview, but in the meantime, I'm going to go through some of my notes from April's interview on the previous recording, which maybe we can stitch together or something. Okay, I love the way that you mentioned career changing very shamelessly. You're like, here's exactly what I did. I was a mom and here's what I do now. And I love that in that you like, I really understood your personality and who you were. And you made it about like, I changed my career because this is something that I was really interested in and it like fit my needs. Jen is here, so I will stop and go over the rest later. But good intro. I feel like that's one of the harder parts for early career engineers is not being afraid to be like, yeah, I was a mom and now I'm doing this. Like it feels hard to do. So you did great. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So we're going to transition to the tech interview now. This is sometimes, the tough one for those of us that came from a different career, because there's not really anything else in the world quite like it. But practicing and seeing other people do it can really take some of that mystery and intimidation factor out. It did for me. So I am super thrilled to introduce Chris and Jen, who are going to demo a tech interview with the same project that you guys will be building for your mock tech. So take it away.
Awesome. All right. Can y'all hear me? Okay, before I start the team, just technical checking. All right, cool. We can action. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to spend some time to do the take home. It's not every day we send out a take home link and we get back the response in a few hours. So really appreciate the punchiness there and the eagerness to kind of go through and keep rolling with this interview process. So I think today, after I kind of explain our stuff, I'll introduce myself so you're not just talking to some random person. But so I was thinking today we could kind of go over your take home. Maybe for the first 10 minutes, you could, if you have it built it up, so kind of showing and demoing really quick, kind of the functionality, and then also kind of doing a code show and tell and showing me kind of what you worked on and any like issues you ran into, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be, the first 10 minutes. And then after that, probably it'll just be more of a overall discussion about your code and kind of taking it to like creating it to be like production ready. So, and then I'll probably leave like a few minutes at the end for you if you have any like burning questions about how our team runs stuff technically. So does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. So before we start, I'm Jennifer. I work at Zapier. And so thank you. Thanks so much for being interested in joining Zapier. We're a really awesome company and I couldn't be more excited to grow the team. I am a software engineer here. And so I'm kind of dabbling. I tend to stay a little bit more in the front end, but definitely still do more full stack kind of work. So I mainly focus a lot in React and in our GraphQL API, and then just kind of business logic in the back. Everything's in TypeScript. So, yep. That's a little bit about me and kind of the technical work that I do personally. And maybe you could kind of introduce yourself and then you can take it away with your code demo.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jen. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, my name's Chris. I use he, him pronouns, located in Portland, Oregon here. And yeah, I am also a full stack engineer, maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on the back end. And yeah, I'm just looking for my next role and I've just heard nothing but good things about Zapier. So, I'm really excited.
Awesome.
Cool. So did you, so where do you want to go from here?
I mean, I think what would be really awesome is if you have it up, would love to see kind of it working, kind of like a searcher really quick, and then we can kind of go straight into the code. So do you have permissions to share your screen?
Let me check. Probably. Share screen. Let's go desktop 1 and share. Okay, you should be able to see my pull request right now.
Perfect. Excellent. Yes.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So do I have this code actually able to run and be demoed right now? Let me pop into Visual Studio Code. Let's pop open a new window here. And then I want to grab this Career Lab Challenge next that I just did. Yeah, okay, we should be able to run with this. Cool. Let me just boot it up real quick and I can do the demo. So let's do a npm start. How to do it. Okay, cool. That's going to open up Vite and boom, here's our TCL Career Lab Art Finder. So the assignment was to be able to basically enable the user to be able to search for different pieces of artwork and then view the artwork within the application. So right now we're running in dev mode. So I think that it's going to be using the stubbed out data, which was pretty nice to kind of save, from making too many API requests. So I think it's stubbed out to be like cats or something. So I'm going to search for cats. Cool. And so then we get the list of results. We see, the title, the artist, and then I also add a little details link to look at that. So if we click the details link, we're gonna follow that to the details page. And then here we can see this beautiful, lovely cat lounging on a big piece of bubble gum, I think. And yeah, so you'll notice that in the URL, we've got a hash identifier here. So I used hash routing in order to do the page navigation, and the actual value of that hash is the image ID. So then this page reads that image ID from the hash in the URL and then fetches this image to display. And it's got a back button, but also because I'm using hash navigation, the browser history functionality actually still works. So I can just click back and boom, we're back here. And it's all just there, which is pretty nice. We can go forward. And then also because it's encoded in the URL, if I like refresh the page, it still works because it's just in the URL. It's not like local state that like got cleared or anything like that. So yeah, that's pretty much the app. Fairly simple. Good little hour exercise, right? So yeah, what questions do you have for me about that, or do you want me to dig into the code next?
Yeah, I mean, I did notice, and this is something that you mentioned in like improvements that you would do, but I thought it wasn't working when I was using it on my own because I kept pressing the enter button.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk? Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of why you pushed off implementing that feature?
Yeah, totally. So ultimately that came from refactoring the search form to not use a form submit anymore. I believe that was a bug that was listed in the original acceptance criteria. And so in order to solve that problem, what I did was I removed the form handler from the form, and I instead passed that function to the button as an on-click handler. So then we're not resubmitting the page to the server as like a normal sort of like form. We're instead just doing it all client side, because we have a cool single page application and we can do that. We can fetch the JavaScript asynchronously from the browser and all that stuff, right? So I switched it over to do that. But what I forgot to do then was re-implement the enter functionality, because you get that normally with a form submit. But then, it wasn't there anymore. So if I was going to come back in and add that, I would also just add like a key down handler or something like that, and then look for the key code to correspond to enter and handle that and do the submission basically.
Excellent. Add a listener. Makes sense. All right, cool. Yeah, no, but I have no other questions. Excellent. I really like the cat selection. So it's always fun to look at kind of this demo. Yeah. So
that's a really good reminder. I didn't actually demo the production functionality. So maybe I can do that real quick so we can actually get non-cat content. So in order to do that, basically we need to run the application as if it was going to be in production. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a build first. So that's going to build the app for production. And then I also added just this little serve command. Serve is just a node module that I just like to use for dev time. I'd use something different in production, but just to kind of demo it, I can do an npm run serve here. Cool. So then it's going to host this app on localhost 3000. And then if I do something like let's do something wild, like search for dogs. Then we get dogs. I don't know what this is going to be. Okay, cool. It's some Greek art with a dog in it. Awesome.
Sweet.
So that's the production functionality, which it does when you're running in production mode. I just look at like the Vite like mode that it's running in, and then I'll either do the locally stubbed data or I'll do a real request if it's in production mode. So
Yeah, I really appreciated that part of your code when I was kind of poking around. And because sometimes, especially when you're implementing early on, you might forget I don't know, a dependency array or two in your use effect, and then all of a sudden you've made like 10,000 API calls and you
Right.
feel really bad.
And
So
then you're locked out of the API and you can't keep going. Yeah, yeah. No, the funny thing is I actually implemented the API code. Like that was the very first thing I did because I'm kind of just back end oriented. I don't know. That's just where
yeah,
my brain goes immediately. And after I'd done it, I was like, wait a minute, but I want the stubbed data. Okay, I'll make it conditional based on what mode we're running in. So
yeah, awesome. I kind of like going back to this whole API thing and making way too many calls. Like this is a free API and they kind of do this service to the public. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on if we launch this production and let's say this is a Google API, like like the location APIs, you have to like pay per query kind of thing.
yeah.
Are there any things that you would do differently in that case to kind of reduce cost, but also not have old stale data? Like, what kind of method would you use there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, there's always trade-offs between like how stale of data is acceptable for your application versus how much are you willing to pay for making those additional requests. So to some extent, it's going to depend on the actual application itself and like what the user's needs are. This is like an art app, right? And so I would kind of want to know like, well, how often does the art change? How often how often do new pieces come in, et cetera? And then like, let's say that there's like new art coming online, like every minute, like every second there's more art coming online, right? Like, well then, we couldn't cache it as aggressively because users are probably going to want to see that content coming through. But let's say that like it doesn't change that often and maybe there's only like a new piece of art added like each week or something, right? Then we could go with a much more aggressive cache duration. As far as how I would like implement that, I think you got a lot of options. I think like a really simple approach just to kind of start would be maybe persisting some of those queries to local storage. So like when, here, I'll jump to my code actually, because we haven't gotten into that yet. So in the API fetching code in utils API, yeah, so in here, whenever we make a request, we are making it to a particular query that's being passed in, right? So I think what I would do is like as a key, I would save the query in local storage, and then the value would just be whatever the API got back, basically. And then I would also set some kind of metadata around the time to live, like how long is this thing in local storage valid before I consider it invalid, right? And then whenever the user searches, I could first check, is this in local storage? If so, is it expired? If it's not expired, serve it up fresh. And if it is expired, throw it in the compost bin and go fetch some more data, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yep.
So for this kind of stuff though, I guess local storage, like kind of caching it, what in your opinion would be like, that's way too much info to cache locally, like on a client's computer? Because like data and stuff is like, it's smaller. The artwork here, like you'd probably just take the metadata and then go fetch the image or something like that. But what would you think where that's kind of not the best? Like, could you think of a scenario like, or a certain kind of app where that might not be like the best use of resources, I guess?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you could theoretically get really large payloads from their API. I don't really have any control kind of over like what they're sending back, right? Although some APIs do give you that control, right? Like some do allow you to kind of pick and choose the fields, but assuming that you can't, then what I would probably do is bring in basically like a kind of like a serializer pattern where we take in this like raw data from the API and then you hand it to a function, and then that function is going to be the thing that well, I guess deserialize would be the appropriate term, because we're getting like the thing from the API and then we're like unpacking it for our app. So it would go in and like pick the particular fields that we want. And then that might even be an interesting place to do maybe certain calculations for like later computed properties that the UI might need or something like that. Kind of create that new object shape that we want that is tailored to like what the UI needs. And then that would be the thing we persist to the local store. Yeah, and that that could be a great optimization because it could help stave some of the amount of storage that the user is using in their local storage. And if you start to run into limits there, that could be one way to improve it. But honestly, like if I started to run into scaling concerns, like my objects are too big, I'm running out of memory in my user's local storage. At that point, I would start to maybe consider some other options too, in terms of like maybe we could have like a proxy server that exists between our application and the API, right? And that proxy server could just be the thing that we make the request to, and then that proxy could persist those queries to some sort of data storage, like maybe using Redis or some kind of like other key value storage server. And then that would be the place where that would be handled. And another good thing about that architecture too is now suddenly the query cache is like usable between multiple users. Exactly. Yeah. So it's not dependent on just this one user's browser's local store, right?
Yeah. And I would imagine that probably scales a little bit better as opposed to just saving it to every single customer's local cache. Because all of a sudden, if you have 1 million customers, that would be unfortunate. But anyways, so I think so sorry, I kind of just headed straight for the theoretical questions after kind of looking at the different parts of your code. Before we kind of leave open some room for questions for you about like how we do stuff technically at Zapier, is there anything that you want to show off in particular about this code? Or another follow-up question I have is, was there anything particularly difficult or something you wish you could have spent more time on?
Yeah, both good questions. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I kind of haven't covered already that I did want to show off in here. I think we mostly talked about it. I think maybe the only other thing worth mentioning too was I felt like it was a really good practice to allow this application to be configured via environment variables. So there are like API URLs that we're using, and maybe in like a testing environment, you might want to use like a test URL or something instead. Just, it's kind of generally a nice thing to be able to configure the application behavior via those env vars. So I wanted to allow that to come through. And so I added like a .env example to show that, and then I ignored the .env and git ignore because secret values might be in the .env file. So it's kind of a good practice not to track that. But that kind of leads into your second question, actually, which is like, what did I struggle with? And one of the things that I was totally unfamiliar with going into this was Vite. So I've used Create React app before. They're kind of similar, but I was not familiar with Vite. So I had to do a little bit of digging in their documentation about how do environment variables get passed. Like it's slightly different. And the way that you have to access them is a little bit different as well. Like you have to do where is it? Import.meta.env.vite image URL.
Yeah, it is a little bit different.
Yeah, so I tripped up a little bit on that. I had to look that up, and then I also had to figure out what the deal was with like the different operating modes. So where did I do that? It's in the API, right? So we actually look at import.meta.env.mode is this other thing that it'll do, and it'll set mode based on like how you're running the app. Like if you're just doing the dev, it'll be development. And if it's a built application, it'll be production. I didn't know any of that though. So I had to like just look that up and figure that out in the docs as I was going, kind of by the seat of my pants a little bit. So, if I had known Vite like before I hit the exercise, I probably could have saved a little time there and gotten some other stuff done. But at the end of the day, I mean, you got to know your tools, right? So I don't feel like it was like wasted time either to learn it.
Yeah.
So.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the demo and taking the time to kind of prepare all of this in advance. I guess in the last like 2 minutes, sorry, we ran over because I asked you too many questions. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Do you have any questions for me?
If I just have 2 minutes, then I think I'll ask you, what's your favorite thing about working at Zapier?
That's an excellent question. I think the thing that I like the most working at Zapier is that I don't know how much you heard from the other people, but every person that I talked to, they were kind of really, really kind and genuinely interested in like you as a person, and also like you technically. And so I think that's very refreshing. Sometimes, especially, I don't know what kind of other companies that you've worked at before, but sometimes I find that technical teams tends to be like 100% focused on the technical. And for me personally, and my personality, that tends to get very boring very quickly. And so I really appreciate all the personalities that kind of bring their full selves to work. So that's kind of what I like. And at the same time, they don't sacrifice kind of their technical prowess, if that makes sense. So I like seeing the well-rounded people every day at work. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And scene.
And we'll call it there. Great ad-libbing, by the way.
Well, it's true. All the people that I met during my interview process and everyone at Collab Lab is amazing. So, woo!
That was great. Questions about or comments specifically about the technical interview or the job fit interview? I think the job fit interview one is like something you've all experienced probably in other areas. So just hearing what April said was really valuable, but the technical one is hard and new. So thoughts?
I'll share some thoughts. Oh, Jen, go ahead, because you're the one that did the interviewing.
I just wanted to say, I think in the job fit interview, it was really excellent when you clarified what answer the interviewer was looking for. Because I think sometimes when we're in the middle of the interview, we just like, I will ramble my head off sometimes, and then that's not exactly that's not what they were getting at. And so I really appreciated that you took the time to kind of clarify. It shows that you have very good communication skills.
And we've got one in the chat. What are some great ways that you respond when you don't know the answer to the question? Any one of our interviewers or interviewees want to take that one?
I mean,
yeah.
Myself personally, I just admit that I don't know. And honestly, I'm a very curious person. It's one of the things that's driven me to where I am as a developer in the first place. And so I'll often like just kind of expand on, if it's, a thought-provoking idea, like, I don't really know, but that's really interesting. I would love to dive deeper into and work through like how that would work, or what that would look like, or, and just follow my curiosity and see where it takes it from there.
That's a great answer. One thing I'd add on to that too is like, if you kind of have an inkling of maybe something that's kind of related to it, that like asking like, oh yeah, is that kind of like this? Or, oh yeah, is that kind of related to this other thing? That at least gives you a little bit of a common ground that you can indicate like, hey, I might not know what you're asking, but I know some other things though, and they might kind of relate. And then that kind of builds a conversation too. Like, let's say that I'm interviewing at a company that uses a bunch of Angular, and I don't know Angular practically at all. And they're asking me questions about it. I just might be like, I don't really know what that is, but it sounds like it might be this thing in React. Is it kind of similar to that? And maybe it's not at all, and I just sound kind of goofy. But like, take a best guess, take an educated guess, and it shows that you're trying to understand. You're trying to relate it to like other things that you know about, rather than just being like, right? But sometimes it is just, and that's completely fine to just admit and move with it, right? So
I was going to say something similar to Chris, where like usually somebody will come at me, especially with the technical question that I don't know. I'll ask clarifying questions or kind of do what Chris did and try and relate it to something. But say they're like, ask you, do you know how to do this X thing in using GraphQL? And you're like, can you tell me what that does? And then if they explain it, be like, I don't know how, but I think I would start by probably Googling to learn a little bit more about X thing. And then, like try and like give them a path of what you would do, how you would find it. Or like, I might ask my teammates or something.
Yeah, no one can know everything. No, so.
I do take it as a takeaway too. So if it's something that after the interview, if I look into it, that is a more general concept and not very specific to that role or that job, then I make sure that I look into it more so that I have more familiarity with it. Like, not necessarily dive in and be like, I'm going to know this next time, but to at least just be like, oh, well, maybe this is an area that I didn't cover yet, and I should have some better understanding of, even at a high level.
Yeah, there was one time when somebody reached back out to me to be like, I went and looked into that, and here's what I found and how I would apply it. And by then we'd already like moved on, but I was like, oh, like that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a really good thing in your follow-up email.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that'd be great. One of the things that I loved, Chris, at the beginning, you were so just masterful in your popping your windows around and getting everything up. And that's one of my weaknesses. And I know that it's one of my weaknesses, but I don't want to appear like I can't find anything. So before an interview, I always had all those things ready. So I could just drag them in and here's this one and this one so that I could fake that.
I panicked a little bit on the inside. I was like, oh no, I
My
don't
bad.
have this up. So I'm glad that you appreciated it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good. But for everyone else, have those up for sure, just in case.
Yeah, that's why I had the qualifier, if you're able to. Otherwise, we'll
Mhm.
move on and just look straight at the code.
Right.
Because curse of the demo is real.
Oh, which is also why, and we didn't even get to this, but I added screenshots of the app to the PR description. I highly recommend you do this on your own PRs, because even if your demo fails, you've got the screenshots you can look at,
You got the
and it also
receipts.
helps people to review your code and to like have the context of, oh, this is what it's doing, you know.
That's funny. I actually do that on my production.
Yeah, like
Because
when
I
you
do a
get
lot of
out in
it in
your
my
job.
work, I always screenshot everything that I built. Like if it's a pop-up modal, there's a screenshot of it. If it's, you know, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, use
We do that
screenshots
in ours
heavily.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because occasionally I'll actually review code from my phone when I'm not on my computer. And so I obviously can't run stuff on my phone. So it's nice having those screenshots there to see, that's what changed. Okay.
Oh, I learned something too, Chris. Well, not learned, but it never even occurred to me. You had the changes, the side by side in VS Code. That was genius too, because sometimes when you're scrolling around, you know what's in the code, but you can't find it because you don't know where it is. So you've got that nice little built-in tool for VS Code, and it also makes you look like you know your tools even better. So I liked that. I'm totally stealing that the next time I have to go through this.
Yeah, I think it might be like, I forget, it's like some Git plugin, I think in VS Code is what that was. And then also, yeah, like in GitHub for PRs, I always look at the split view with like
Yeah.
I don't know, I kind of like it. If you haven't tried it, maybe try it. You might like it.
I always look at it before I send my stuff up, but I never thought about doing it in an interview and like using it so that you communicate, or you're demoing for your team, you know, whatever
Right.
it is, you can get to your changes quick. You can it shows without words, you know, what you put into it, just very nicely visual. Anybody have any other questions? Well, this was great, super informative, all kinds of ideas. I'm going to put both the recordings up, and this is a little message for anyone who comes afterwards that yes, there's 2 videos for today. I'll put both the recordings up so you can go back and look at them again, because there was a bunch of stuff coming at you and lots of little things that you can pick out and tidbits and tips. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend. You have a bunch on your plate, Collabbies, and we're here for you. So let us know anything you need.
See y'all soon. Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.